Now, foreign ministers of the G7 will conclude talks today, which have been taking place in Germany. Ukraine was top of the agenda, with diplomats pledging to provide more military aid in what they called a powerful sign of unity. The co-founder of the Council on Geostrategy, James Rogers, joins us now. James, very good morning to you. I wonder what you may have made of what seems like pending move by both Sweden and Finland to get into NATO. What is your assessment of how much that shakes the kaleidoscope, so to speak?
Yeah, good morning, to be with you. This is quite a significant move because, of course, Finland and Sweden remained primarily neutral during the Cold War. And although they moved closer towards NATO and, of course, with their membership of the European Union, the Western position during the aftermath of the Cold War, they're now seeking direct NATO membership. The President and Prime Minister of Finland issued a statement 2 days ago, and then Sweden issued a report yesterday which confirmed that they see the deterioration of the European strategic situation. They believe that Russia is an increasingly unpredictable state, even more unpredictable than the Soviet Union was, and that this requires them both to move towards membership of NATO. And of course, a couple of days before that, Boris Johnson visited both capitals to issue security assurances to both countries.
So what then do we make of potential opposition coming from Turkey? I mean, do they have the casting vote in all of this? How much sway does Erdoğan really have in capitals like Washington, London, so on?
Well, it requires unanimity for a new member to join the alliance, so Turkey could cause problems. However, some analysts believe that it's more a case that Turkey might be seeking some kind of concessions rather than seeking to block them outright. And of course, countries like the US and the UK, which provide the mainstay of the resources and strategic wherewithal of the alliance, have some say over the ultimate direction, shall we say, but it could cause some diplomatic wrangling in order to placate the Turks and allow both Sweden and Finland in.
We had an interview, we've been carrying on the channel, an interview with between our international affairs editor and the head of defence intelligence for Ukraine. A couple of eye-raising kind of lines coming out of that. The first, of course, that there could be an end in sight to the war. The second, that there is potentially a coup building in Moscow. I mean, how much validity should we give to those in the absence of any further evidence?
I think that's difficult to say. I mean, I think the Russian objective has changed, of course. Initially, it was to seize Kiev in a sort of lightning strike. That failed, and then the Russians tried to use heavy armor to surround, encircle, and then seize the city. That also failed. So now they are moving increasingly to operations in the east of Ukraine, where they already have a degree of influence. Now, the Russians have always sought, I think, over the last, let's say, 8 years since they invaded Ukraine back in 2014, to engage in what's called non-linear warfare. That is to say, to actually provoke and promote conflict in the country in order to drag it down and to prevent it from moving towards both NATO and the European Union, which, of course, is what Ukraine has been seeking to do. So there might be an objective here within Russia to actually just prolong the conflict without end in order to prevent Ukraine from consolidating and joining the West. Now, on the terms of a coup in Moscow, that is a possibility, but at this stage, I think it is very unlikely. The Putin regime has some degree of control over the country and has built that up over the last 20-odd years. But nonetheless, it is true that the regime's war in Ukraine has failed miserably so far, and that's becoming increasingly apparent to the Russian people. It is no longer a special military operation, as the Kremlin calls it, but it's become increasingly an outright war, and a war, as we've seen, with some pretty horrendous consequences and actions undertaken by the Russians. And I think this, despite the regime's control over the media space, has become increasingly apparent to the Russian people. As well as, of course, the Russian political and economic elites. And in that context, a coup in the long run or a regime change within the country cannot be entirely, I think, ruled out.
How then is this information getting to the Russian public, given the stranglehold that they have on the media, given that the controls that they place on the internet and elsewhere? I mean, this week, of course, it was Victory Day parade, and lots of Russian eyes will have been on that, but it was a drastically reduced Victory Day parade by my reckoning.
Yeah. I think it primarily through word of mouth and information that's seeping through from the soldiers that have been sent to Ukraine to fight, getting back to their families, and other forms of information exchange like that. Of course, as you rightly point out, that the regime does continue to have a strong hold over the information that the Russian people are able to access.
Great to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.